Alrighty, so I'm just going to go ahead and get started. And if anyone joins, then they'll be able to kind of catch up with what we're talking about. But hi, everyone. Thank you for coming today. We're doing the second part of our Leaders in Healthcare series for this semester, and we're really excited to have Dr. Dreama Sloan-Kelly joining us today. So she is the CEO and president of Dr. Sloan-Kelly Consulting, and she'll be telling us a little bit more about her path within healthcare, as well as through starting her own company and everything with that. But if this is your first ViTAL event, welcome and thank you for joining us. If you don't know who we are a healthcare innovation club here on campus. And if you ever want to kind of learn more about us, be free to join us at our Leaders in Healthcare events, which are just speaker series such as these. And our topic for this semester is digital health. So we've been having speaker series of people who have had a lot of experience in this realm, and we're going to continue that in this spring. So this is our last kind of speaker event for this semester, but at the end, I'll tell you a little bit more about other events that we're going to be hosting later this semester as well. But without further ado, I'll hand it off to Dr. Sloan-Kelly to tell us a little bit more about herself and her path in healthcare so far.
All right, awesome. So everybody can hear me fine? Okay, great. Well, I am excited about being here. I'm Dr. Dreama Sloan-Kelly. I always love speaking it to students along all different parts of their journey. So even from high school to college to graduate school. And I think one thing that I've always learned is that when you can have an impact on someone's life as they're developing, as they're making choices, it has the greatest impact. I've had some really amazing mentors, and those mentors walked into my life around when I was in high school, and they are still in my life to this day, but their ability to shape me was really, really great. So I'm very excited about being here with you guys today. And pretty much what I'm going to do, I love the fact that you had set questions for me, and I'm going to go along with that so that I'm able to stay focused on what your goals are and trying to get certain types of information. So to give you a little bit of information about my educational background, I am a Texas girl from Dallas originally. Had this big dream because my neighbor, who was an attorney here in Dallas, went to Wellesley. And I ended up going to Wellesley College for undergraduate, probably one of the best experiences of my life as a woman, because it really helped to shape my independent voice as a woman. And at that time, I swore I was going to be a doctor. I actually went in thinking I was going to go pre-med and mechanical engineering, went to MIT, met my first husband there, and then I figured out MIT was not for me because I like to have fun. So I decided to do pre-med and political science. So I said, well, okay, because this will allow me to study Tuesday to Thursday and kick it at SIGEP on Friday to Monday. And it worked out because I got the MRS degree for 20 years, so I wasn't too complaining about that, and 3 great kids. I was pre-med in political science, which was already weird to begin with. My senior year lived on a floor of 5 women. All of 4 of us out of 5 of us were applying to medical school. I was the oddball in the group, and I was the only one to get in med school, which was kind of funny. I applied to 17 schools. I think I got into 12. And I think it was because I was different. Like, I wasn't like everybody else. My essay wasn't like everybody else. One of the interesting things is I remember I went to Penn State for my interview, and I used to tell my mom, I was like, if I get the interview, I got the school. But I went to this interview, and there were only 3 students there. And I remember calling my mom and saying, this is the weirdest interview I've ever been on. There's only 3 people here. And they gave me my acceptance on the spot. So right then and there, I said, okay, I can do this, because that made it easy. I went to Tufts University School of Medicine, and I think within the first semester, I'm like, this is not for me. No way in the world. Sorry, this is not what I want to do with my life. I was sleepy. I was miserable. I never thought life could be that bad. I'm not even on the front. My kids laugh all the time. I was just blown away. And, I was always told I was going to be a doctor. I wanted to be a doctor. I don't think anybody ever explained to me what that meant. My mentor was Dr. Nealon Youngblood. He's from Dallas. His father was my dad's best friend. He was one of the first Black ophthalmologists here in Dallas. And he said, Dreama, just keep pushing. And I'm like, man, this is not for me. And Nealon actually was only an ED physician for 1 year. He started one company, then he started Pharaoh's Capital Group, and now Nealon Youngblood is worth $600 million and is the richest Black man in the state of Texas. So that's the man that told me to keep moving forward. Plus, he said it might kill my parents if I dropped out. So I had to kind of rethink my whole process. So I got married, and the summer after my first year of medical school, I went and worked in medical records. Because I had to come home, and I went and worked in medical records, and that was one of the first times I was able to get a taste of something in medicine that was outside of the actual clinical realm, and I loved it. I loved going through the medical records. I loved trying to understand how the finance part works, but it didn't all click together. Came my second year of medical school, I pretty much told like my dean, who's actually a Wellesley graduate, I hate this. Like, I don't really think this is for me. And she said, keep pushing, keep pushing. Junior year, I made a decision that I didn't want to go to residency. And the dean that was very supportive of me said, that was very supportive of me, had left. And a new dean had came in. And she said, we knew we shouldn't have gave you an acceptance here. Now, that's just asking me to make you a fool, because I was like, okay, all right, so, but you did. And there's nothing you can do with that. And I'm going to guarantee you're going to read about me one day. And I'm going to guarantee you that I'm going to give a name to Tufts that is not about the medical part, but about the things that I'm able to do in medicine. So I shaped my third and fourth year of medical school to surround all my clinicals around understanding almost every area of medicine that I could get into. So I made sure I did things in ortho, did things in cards, did things in psychiatry, stayed in pediatrics, did internal medicine. I went through all the different gamuts of everything that I could know. And while I was there, I would convince doctors to let me play with their billing, let me look at your coding, let me start examining your finances. And they all entertained me in that quest. And when I had two children in medical school. I had my oldest and my youngest. And when I was done, I said, you know what? I think I want to go into business. What really pivoted me into that realm was that my oldest son was diagnosed with a chronic illness that we at the time did not know if he was going to survive or not. Sterling was probably 4 years old, and I was a mom, and I had to make some hard decisions. So I decided to go and become the head of allied health for Lincoln Tech. And at that point, I ran their whole medical assisting and medical billing and coding program. It was a year. Those kids stressed me out because I never knew. Like, I had people calling me from jail, telling me, you get somebody to bail me out. And I'm like, what? But it was a great experience. I got to learn how to deal with people that were day students, night students. I grew the school from that program from being 8 students to 650 students in 1 year. I was recruited away from them by a very large billing company in Boston on Beacon Street. They asked me to come on as their chief compliance officer. So I joined that company for a year, and I learned everything I could learn about compliance. I went on sales calls with the CEO of the company. It was amazing to get that experience, and all I did was kept following it away. And every time I gave him an idea about what other things he could do, he would always say, yeah, that's not where I really want to go. One of the things that my husband at the time encouraged me to do is that I don't like working on Mondays and Fridays. It's just not my thing. I do now because I'm so busy, but then I wasn't working for myself. So I told the man I only worked on Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. And then I started developing my company on Mondays and Fridays. And my then husband was telling me, he said, when you get your first client, you can get your office. And I got my first client within 6 weeks. And then that's when I got my office. I quit my job. I had signed up both of my kids for private school. I made everybody faint, but that's just me. And I started the business, and that was over 15 years ago. So it has been an amazing journey. It was not something that anybody would have thought of. It was Kelly Sloan Associates. It's Dr. Sloan-Kelly Consulting now. I deal primarily with medical billing, coding, and practice management services. So I work with physicians on the side of their clinical documentation and how we transfer that over to their medical codes and how that relates to the reimbursement. So that's the one arm I do. I have another arm that I do training and trying to teach providers how to document appropriately and also coders how to code and bill appropriately. And my most lucrative arm is my legal part. I work with a lot of large law firms across the country. A lot of times physicians find most of my cases over the past 2 months, they're being hit by Medicare, Medicaid, and Blue Cross Blue Shield and private payers for over $500,000. And these are solo practitioners. And then I go in with the attorneys as an expert witness, and I refute every argument that the insurance companies have. So it's a lot of fun. I get bored easy. So that's the reason why I have so many buckets that I play in. And I also do a lot of subcontracting work to other larger coding companies like the Coding Network and other larger companies like that as an expert consultant and also as an expert educator. So that just gives you a little bit of background about my little journey, or my long journey. I'm 47, so I still got a little ways to go. So one of the questions that's here, I did talk about my journey in healthcare. Do you have any advice for students pursuing the medical journey? Just be passionate about it. Even my kids, a lot of times you'll see doctors and doctors will tell their kids, don't be a doctor. I don't tell them that. I think the one best piece of advice that Neelan gave me was that one of the things that medicine and science gives you is that it teaches you how to think. And we don't think like everybody else. So a lot of times people will come to me for understanding about certain aspects of business because I think and I dissect things in a very different way than the average person. So I tell people that whatever you do in healthcare, be passionate about it. And also don't be afraid to make your own way. I made a way. I was probably one of the first physicians out there that was a physician and a certified coder. It made no sense to anybody, but I was one of the first. Now you see several of them doing that, but that allowed me to make my way. So if there's not a path, if you have an idea, move forward with it. Did you ever practice medicine? And if yes, and if you've transitioned out, what made you take the step to leaving practice? So I was a sub-intern and then decided that I had kids, and partly because of my son, that was not going to work for me. So I did not go into full practice. The transition for me, I think, I'm not even gonna lie, I want to say the first couple of years, I felt kind of weird, right? Because all of my friends went the traditional way. I was untraditional from the jump. I'm the one sitting in, second year medical school classes with a big old belly, pregnant and trying to listen. And, I did everything different. So I don't, the first couple of years I felt like I didn't fit. Maybe I made a mistake and all, maybe I should have just went ahead and went forward with it, but it wasn't in my heart. It just wasn't in my gut. And I've always been taught to follow my gut, and that's what I ended up doing. And I'm glad I did. I'm glad I didn't look back and look at what everybody else did. And what's so funny is that those same people that I was looking at and saying, wow, I should have just followed their trajectory, are now coming to me asking me, how do I get in business? How do I get out of this? I'm miserable. I'm not happy. But they weren't happy back then either. I always believe in walking in your truth and always being on a quest for peace within yourself and defining your own happiness. The one thing I tell students all of the time, and I'll tell you, I tell my kids, I don't care if you're happy all the time, because baby, life will happen and there are going to be times that you're downright miserable. But if there are things that you have in your life and you figure out a career path for you that allow you to have peace and you to know that you're in the right space, that is everything. Because when life is up or when it's down, you're able to keep on trucking because you know you're in the right direction. So your next one, the main focus of your consulting firm is to help medical practices with from the financial end. Why did you choose this focus to focus your attention and support with? I love money. It's just that simple. I always love money. My dad had one of the largest Black-owned construction firms here in Dallas. And I went with him everywhere. And I was his sidekick. And he would give me a title. And I was always making fake checks and all this kind of stuff. I love money and I love to help people figure out how to make money. I love watching practices that I've started with, especially women-owned practices that these women are starting off, maybe newly. One of my clients I've had for the past 15 years, she had gotten divorced, had 2 small kids and thinks she could make it, started her pediatric practice part-time, was doing her own billing. I was walking her through the process. Now she has 3 buildings that she owns outright in New York. And she has a bustling practice. And she takes Medicaid too. Like, she did not even forget like all different aspects of the community. So I really, really am. I just love money, and that's what made me want to focus on that. And very few people are there to support physicians. You always see support in regards to the insurer side, but you never see someone wanting to help a doctor. And they're always assumed, well, it's because doctors have all this money. That is the biggest misnomer out there. Like, if you divide out how many hours a physician works for how much they get paid, it is like almost working at McDonald's at this point. It's ridiculous. And when I was looking at my kid's father, he was at MIT. They were walking out making more money than everybody in their, 2 years into practice. It was wild to me. And so there's something wrong with a system that doesn't try to help these doctors through a process that is actually, as we go forward, trying to take more from them. And that's not their focus. Their focus is on the art of medicine. The next question, how did your company have to pivot? Oh yeah, during COVID, have you had to change the services that you offer? And if so, yes. Wow, COVID was interesting. So I moved, I wasn't planning to move here in the middle of the daggone pandemic. So I'm paranoid. So as soon as I saw things going weird in Boston, I was actually supposed to go on a business trip to University of Pittsburgh Hospital to speak with a group of physicians there and help them with their clinical documentation. And I kept watching the numbers go up. And then somebody outside of my loft, I was living in downtown Worcester, they had on hazmat suits. And then these people started walking out of my building with masks on before anybody else was wearing masks. And so at that point for myself, I said, I'm ready to go. Like, this is not working. And my fiance lives here in Dallas. So I switched my ticket and flew to Dallas. And my son went to stay at his father's house to finish off the school year. What happened in March was a little wild. My fiance had a massive stroke. We don't know if it was secondary to COVID because they really weren't testing for COVID here. And the way they see things here is very different than they do in New England. So when COVID slowed down, it really actually slowed business down. It slowed down at a right time for me. How COVID initially impacted my business, for the first time in my life, I was always told that medicine was recession proof. That is not the case for COVID. It's the first time ever that I've seen everything come to a halt. We went from getting questions from people, having questions about coding or wanting these audits done and this, that, and the third, to everything stopping because we had no elective procedures. Doctors weren't seeing patients in the office. It was just insane. And so I had a lot of doctors calling me crying, saying, I have no revenue coming in. I don't know what to do. But I had no answers for them because I've never seen anything like that in my life. Now, how business changed for me was probably, I want to say, so it was March, April, May, I get my first phone call from an attorney that has a psychiatry practice that Blue Cross Blue Shield has come at them for a retake of $540,000. And this practitioner did not have that kind of money sitting in his bank account. And so she needed help. Probably 2 weeks after that, there was another case and then another case. So I probably ended up with 8 legal cases over the course of this pandemic, and probably 4 of them are still pending. I just picked up a new one, 2 new ones this week. And so what I have found is that even though Medicare put a moratorium on their audits, a lot of the other insurers were using this as a time to actually try to make back some of their money on the back of physicians. And so this has been very, very shocking for me. And so that has been pretty much what I have been focused on when it first started coming back up. And then now I want to say probably about 98%, like I'm about up to 98% of what I capacity wise for my normal like training and auditing and that kind of stuff, my legal work, we're about almost up to where we were prior to the pandemic. I'm a little nervous. I just heard that Cleveland Clinic, I was reading today, they have already started rescheduling their elective surgeries. So I'm really excited about my legal cases, but I think that there might be another pivot coming down the road if we continue to go forward in this pandemic. Technology-wise, I'm a tech geek. So everything I've always done has always been remote. So I've always been able to pivot. So you'll never see a time, like I'm never that entrepreneur that will ever tell a client that I'm on vacation. If I'm laying on the beach, I'm emailing you from the beach. Does that mean I don't disconnect? I do. But I know, like, one of the things that I did learn about from the man that was that owned the building company in Boston, he said that a client should never know your movements. So you'll never see me having, I'm away. I want my clients to always think that I'm there. Do I set boundaries? I do. So I do have clients. I have one in particular. And he's a little anxious, and so he'll try to email me at night or whatever. I just ignore his calls like he was a guy, like a regular old guy. Like I will get you when I get you, and then get right on back to it. But I have a personal relationship with all of my clients, and I think that's what has made them long term. Everything in my whole world is digitized. Do not send me paper. Do not ask me to print. Like I will print some medical records just because I have to like circle or underline some things, but everything is digitized in my world. So when I had to make a pivot in regards to COVID, I didn't. I use ShareFile, Google. Everything I use is definitely all internet based. Now, what I would like to learn more is the social media stuff, but that's all you young people. Y'all haven't gotten up there yet to start paying for my services. The one thing I do want to tell you guys before I go on to these other questions, one thing that popped in my mind when I just said paying for my services, I think that there's one thing that we have to teach everybody that's interested in being an entrepreneur is that you cannot be afraid to make the ask. Do not be afraid to ask people to pay you what you're worth. When I started my company, I used to tell my daddy I was going to charge people $25 an hour, and he cursed me out. He was like, you did not go to Wellesley and Tufts to be paid $25 an hour. So I increased it to $50. And he still was mad. And so I remember when I first started, I got up to $125. I thought I was doing something. And now I don't care. I charge $225 an hour. If you can't afford that, then call somebody else that you can't afford. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to knock back on my door, which they always do. Because I know how I'm good at what I do, and I price it at where I'm at. So never be afraid to make that ask. Men, you guys in the group, you guys don't tend to be afraid to do it, but I definitely know women, we definitely tend to be like, well, I don't know if I want to do that, do it. Okay, because all they can do is say no. And all you can do is go back and say, well, let me see how I'm going to restructure that contract. Don't be afraid to, try other things out. So like when I wanted to start I started with seminars before I went to webinars. When I started that, I worked with another company for a while, saw how they did things. I was like, okay, I did seminars for them. I figured out what I liked about them, figured out how I wanted to change it up, and then pivoted right on out and did it my way. So don't be afraid, especially right now, to continue to absorb as much as you can and make it your own. And just step out there on faith, because I guarantee you have to have a level of intestinal fortitude to be an entrepreneur. For you guys to get in this group, you already have that. So you want to make sure that you forge forward without any fear whatsoever, because trust me, it always works out. Even if the first business doesn't make it, because my first didn't. I think I started when I was like 22. it's always going to work out at some point. How does your company use digital health technologies? Is it something you want to implement more? So I work with probably, oh my gosh. So I bought stock in Cerner because I deal with Cerner so much, the receivers and all that crap. Everybody's on EMRs now, which is very, very helpful. So either the way I deal with most of my clients technology wise is either I tap into their medical record system. And then I have one like client here that I'm like their chief compliance officer. So I am always in their EMR because I'm always doing things with their templates, or I'm always auditing their physicians whatsoever, whatever. And we use ShareFile a whole lot because that's one of the safest ways for us to transmit PHI without the risk of a HIPAA breach. So this is really, really technology is really, really critical in what I have to do because, I mean, medicine, we still use fax machines, believe it or not, because it is still the safest way to transmit information. But it's slowly, finally starting to change over as doctors become younger. Our club has a focus on entrepreneurship, innovation, and business and healthcare. Do you have any advice about healthcare consulting for students interested in pursuing it? Absolutely. I think one of the things that you do is that you go after gigs that are going to give you some flexibility that you might work very, very hard and they may not give you the best rate at the beginning, but that is what you want. You want to get down and dirty so that you can get your feet wet so that you can kind of understand how the wheels turn. And as you understand how the wheels turn, then you'll start to develop in your mind, all right, this is kind of how I want to, do things for myself. The way that you build up your clientele is literally marketing 101. I think one of the things that you guys are learning here with this group and knowing how to approach people and bring them in is critical. I think one thing I didn't say when I started my business, what I was doing on Mondays and Fridays, I was cold calling. So they have this book of physicians in New England that you can buy. And I think it's like $200 a book. And I sat through that book and I called every doctor and asked for the practice manager. And I realized it was a numbers game. And at that time, it wasn't digitized. That was 15 years ago. And so I would call them, and I didn't pay somebody else to do it. And then every time I got a meeting, usually probably 1 out of 3 of those meetings would turn into a client. And then from that, as a consultant, what consultants do is that they have to trust you. You want, the way you make your money is your client trusting your opinion, wanting to call you, because literally there a lot of times, they'll do consulting for, for a specific project or something. But now a lot of my money comes from you wanting to spend $200 just to talk to me for 1 hour, just so I can hear your thoughts or what do you think about that, because they trust you. So you can say to them, okay, well, based on my experience, based on my market research, based on everything I've had to deal with, this is my advice to you. And so that's the reason why it's so important to really make sure, one, you get out there and you get your hands into a lot of different things. But 2, it's about relationship building and being trustworthy so that they can feel like, most of my clients swear they're my best friend. And that's how I want it. I want it where they ask about my kids or they send the kids little trinkets or something like that, and it totally trips me out. But it's because they really do feel like they're part of my family. And that's how, when you are a consultant, your goal is to have long-term clients that also have those long-term clients refer you to other people. So when I was younger, like you guys, I did a lot more work. Like my kids would tell you, they were stuffing envelopes. They were doing all that scut work for me to get my name out there. Now it's just like I get a call or I get an email, so-and-so told me about you. You did a great job in their case, or you were really supportive in helping them revamp their practice. I need you in my life. And so I'm like, hey, I'm here. And they sign the contract and we're going. So it's very, very critical that those relationships are there. And that's, to me, what makes you a very, very good consultant. What are ways in which we can work to minimize health inequities? Oh, you on a good one with me on that one. Health inequities in the digital health world. Well, health inequities are real. This is a passion of mine. Even when I was in medical school, I used to get mad when we did dermatology, and I said, well, I'm like, you cannot tell me that every derm issue is only on white people. So if you got somebody of color come in, how in the world are we supposed to learn how this is supposed to look like on darker skin? Then it wasn't received too well, but whatever. Health inequities are real. I think that the pandemic has proven how real they are. It's not a political issue. It's a inherent bias issue. It is an assumption that certain people are not capable of. I remember when I was in the clinical realm, I remember people mistaking me as the sitter and not as a physician. It used to make me so mad. Now, I don't care. Like, if you want to sit there and question my credentials, I don't want to work with you, and I don't have to because I own it. So bye. And I've done that to people in a minute. But healthcare inequities the digital world hasn't really helped lessen it. I think it possibly has highlighted it more. I can give you an example. Was telling my fiance for the longest, I'm like, there's health disparities. I'm a member of NMA, National Medical Association. It's a Black version of the AMA for Black physicians in America. And we always have, part of our conference is about health inequities. And I was always telling my fiance this until he when he had a stroke, he lived it firsthand. And the first thing they did, instead of testing for COVID, they tested him for illicit drugs. So they tested him for every illicit drug in the book. Not on drugs. His fiance is a doctor, told them very straight up what was going on, told him he was stroking. Within 15 minutes of him stroking. Then when they were discharging him, once we found out what was really going on, and it was actually a missing enzyme, they tried to diagnose him with, first they diagnosed him with hyperlipidemia, which he did not have, which I had to fight to get him off the medication because there was an assumption because he was Black. That's what he had. And then when I went through his medical records, they had linked an HIV medication to him, and he's not HIV positive. So there are stories like this that I can tell you across the world, across the gamut that I have had to deal with. I remember one of my patients was a very wealthy woman from Haiti. She was at NEMIC for chest pain. They didn't believe it was chest pain. They told her it was a stomach ailment. I just so happened to have picked her up and decided to do cardiac enzymes on her. And she was actually having a massive heart attack, but was presenting atypical, which most women do. And I was able to get her admitted, and it was really, really scary. And it just frustrates me. And so I hope that with it becoming the forefront now because of COVID, I'm hoping that people will become more aware of it and be more aware of their implicit bias and not have it affect how they treat patients. And I look forward, I do. Digitizing it makes it very, very easy to see. So it makes a lot of things very easy to see, but it's very real. And so if there's anything that I would encourage all of you guys to do is always be an advocate for equality in healthcare, regardless of race or class, because not only are there racial disparities, but there are class disparities. You take somebody that's on Medicaid, they're not going to get the same health care that they would if they were not on Medicaid. So there's financial disparities as well. So what do you foresee the future of healthcare looking like in the months and following years after the pandemic? Wow. There's money in healthcare. I'm not going to front. I mean, there was one thing that I used to tell my dad I wanted to be a lawyer, and he told me I know too many broke lawyers don't go that way. So I was just like, all right. So healthcare is going to continue to grow. I do not think we're going to have universal healthcare at all. I just don't think that that's something that's going to happen in this country. I do think that the way medicine went from being very, very independent, where you had a lot of solo practitioners, et cetera, to then hospitals acquiring everybody. And I think we're getting ready to go back into the independence. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I think there's great opportunity in the healthcare realm on the pharmaceutical and medical device side. I give you an example. I act as a consultant for Pasira, and they have a cryoneurolysis treatment that they use that's called Iovera. And I actually work on their reimbursement. I'm a doctor that talks to other doctors and tell them how to get paid for the procedure that they just did that's cutting edge, that we're able to get rid of opioid use by using Iovera. So that's other ways that you can pivot into other areas of medicine. So I think it's going to continue to grow. I think if you go into healthcare, you'll never be hungry. It's just figuring out your niche and not allowing people to pigeonhole you into an area that they think is best for you. Don't be afraid, and this is still the one who wanted to quit and did not want her mom to have a heart attack, because I had that pressure. But do not be afraid to walk in your dream and to sit there and say, I know there's something different I can do. And don't be afraid to fail at it. Like I said, I started Meditran. We had like 2 different businesses. Dr. Youngblood did the same thing before he started Theros Capital Group. So don't be afraid to fail and get right back up and go at it again. I don't know any entrepreneur, even my dad, I think he did 2 businesses before his popped up. And then I think the last piece of advice on that is don't think it takes you a lot of money to start a business. My dad started his company on $20. I think you're going to progress mine forward. I think I probably started mine on $100. And it was just bare bones, and that's how I developed it from that way forward. And he was the one that taught me, do not be afraid. Don't think you have to have this and that in order to go there. And then probably within year 10, he was the first Black man in the state of Texas to get $1 million contract from Exxon. He was doing cathodic protection with oil. So I think that was really, really helpful for me. And that's one piece of advice that I pass on to everyone as I go forward. Just don't think that it takes a whole lot of money to get yourself started.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sloan-Kelly, for all of your insights and stories and your journey. We're going to open it up for a Q&A, but I'm going to give you a second to kind of breathe. Thank you so much for answering all of our questions. I know some of them were a lot, but at least from a personal level, I related to what you said about kind of being non-traditional. I'm pre-med. I'm getting a major in behavioral neuroscience, but a minor in political science. So definitely a weird balance of things, but I appreciate kind of the holistic view overall. Someone dropped a question in the chat, so I'll ask that to you first, and then Nirvan has his hand raised, so I'll go to him next. So Shashank asked, how do you expect medical billing and coding to change under a Biden administration, and how do you deal with those kinds of changes?
So the key thing with medical billing and coding is that it changes every year regardless. So the CPT codes change every year for January 1st, and the ICD-10 codes, which are diagnosis codes, change every year in October. So we always have business for that reason. I think the only thing that could possibly change medical billing and coding is if we go into a universal healthcare system, and that's not what Biden's moving towards. So for us, it's always something, because we're always going to have to be able to, I'll have clients that are saying to me, how do we maneuver Medicare, but also Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts? So I have to be able to understand Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts, and then also Medicare, and then also Mass Health or whatever. So whoever's president doesn't affect my business per se in regards to healthcare, because healthcare, I'm in the sense of, me getting business coming in, it's really not, it's not affected in that way. But one thing that I can say, it affects your finances. So, that part of it, if taxes move or whatever, it can affect it on that side, but not with business coming in.
Awesome, thank you. And Nirvan, I think you raised your hand, so if you want to unmute or just drop your question in the chat.
Yeah, I can just say it. So, you just touched upon health disparities. And I guess I'm kind of curious. So I don't know if you know the numbers, but health disparities cost the system millions and millions of dollars, just because of so many misdiagnoses, repeated hospitalizations, just, the whole gamut. So and I guess the conversations you have on a day-to-day, or when you talk to physicians, does that ever come up as, a priority, hey, how can I work towards eliminating these in my practice? Or, are there certain things that you're seeing in that direction where, people are taking a step or, hiring consultants to help them with that, or is that something that's still kind of missing?
I think that's something that's still kind of missing. I think one of the things that I have seen as a Black woman, so when I started my business, I didn't let people know I was Black because I was really concerned about how it was going to be received. And if I would go in certain areas, I would find that out flat out. Like they'll walk in and be like, oh my God, like she's Black and she's got big boobs. Like what in the world's going on? I'm like, yeah, well, you already paid. So you got to figure this out. Either walk out, I still got your money. And then finally people started realizing I knew what I was talking about. And what I have learned just from my client base is that physicians of color are more apt to be audited and fined more so than anybody else. And it's disproportionate and it blows my mind. And these are also physicians that are more apt to take Medicaid. And it really, really, so even if we're talking about just disparities in healthcare, just on the side of just the patients, you're also seeing it on the side of the physicians as well. And so they're picked on. So I had one of my first clients was a Chinese doctor in Chinatown in Boston. And he was a great doctor. And so he would somehow, he would write all his notes in Chinese and then have somebody translate them into the EMR. But however it was getting translated into the EMR, it wasn't coming across right. And they pretty much tried to destroy this man. They put him up for $400,000 and tried to suspend his license. And that was my first walk into this. And I'm like, do you not understand that English is not his first language? Do you not understand that he writes his notes in Chinese? Do you not understand that he also brings in non-traditional westernized medicine into his practice? And they completely demanded of retiring. And it was sad. And I've seen it consistently across the board in people that I've dealt with. Now, when it comes to actually dealing with disparities in healthcare among patients, I do think that there's a need there. I think that there's not enough people that are crunching that data. I think first we got to get people to admit that they have inherent biases. And that's something that's very, very difficult to get people to actually have that conversation, especially right now because we're in such a polarized environment. But I think that if there's a way to create a company that is saying this is how it's going to financially benefit you, not only just benefit your patients, but financially benefit you. Whenever you're in healthcare and you can show financial benefit, they will listen to you because it's all about the dollar at the end of the day. And so I do think it's a great idea. I think it's something that needs to be there because I can give you several examples just, anecdotally, or even just reading through charts and knowing that that patient is of color and they got treated completely differently than I know if that patient was a majority or was wealthier or anything like that.
Awesome. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
If anyone else has any questions, please feel free to unmute or you can put it in the chat and I can ask it, but go for it otherwise.
I have a question.
Okay.
Hi, Dr. Sloan-Kelly.
Hi.
So as a healthcare consulting company, I was wondering, how do you set your company apart from your competitors in the field?
So, all right, so that's so funny. So I had told you about the dean that was like, oh, we shouldn't even let you in if we knew you were going to do this. So I told her, I said, watch, you're going to read about me one day. And they did a feature on me in the Tufts Medical magazine. And I took it back up there and put it on her desk very kindly so she could remember what I told her. But I decided to be different, right? So my mom was super conservative Southern. So, it wasn't enough to me just to be a Black woman in this. I wanted to come out different. So they'll tell you she's Black, she's sassy, she has all her jewelry and her low-cut dresses. She's going to give you everything you need. And that's actually how I branded myself. And that's where Dr. Diva came from. And that's how I birthed Dr. Diva. And everybody bought onto it. At first, I was scared that it was going to make it very male-centric, that I was only going to attract male clients. But my female clients loved the energy as well. And so, I remember one time I went to go see a client and I went with a turtleneck on. I don't remember because I hate turtlenecks, but for whatever reason, I wore that. And two of the owners came out and they were like, are you sick? Like, what's wrong? And I said, oh, baby, I was just doing something different. So I was told early on that I was the brand And so I branded the company around me. And so I made sure that everything that was kind of put out there was just around Dr. Diva, which is different. Like, you're not going to see, especially in medicine, you know, there's more, your younger people are coming out and pushing that mark. I wasn't that one that was like, doctors wear bikinis. I mean, I thought that was silly. But I'm not afraid to make it about me and to stand out among everybody else. I think the other part is my logo, for doctors by doctors, that a lot of times consulting firms like mine are primarily just business people and they don't understand the clinical side. I think the reason why I'm successful is because doctors love talking to another doc. They like, we know you get it. So I'll have clients that will ask me to come on a call because they have a difficult doctor that they're dealing. We had this one doc that wanted to argue every trauma case that he had. And they're like, Doc, can you get on the call? Usually our calls with him take an hour. I got it done in 15 minutes because he felt, reaffirmed and just better having another physician on the call, but understood and respected my opinion in regards to billing and coding more. So don't be afraid to be yourself.
That's very insightful. Thank you so much.
Yep. Any other questions?
I can go ahead. Go ahead, Chris.
One of the biggest things you said that stuck out to me was, like, if you want to pursue medicine, you have to be passionate about it. And like earlier in your talk, like, you like very like bluntly stated like you were just not enjoying yourself, and like we've never had a doctor come on and say like, oh man, it was rough. Like, they always say the good things. They never say like, so how did that, like, how did you like get through that, like in medical school, like voicing that, and or if you did voice that kind of opinion, and just like going, like you said, going like different from the norm, but still being yourself, expressing your real opinions?
So I'm not afraid to stand out. I think for me, and it's funny, and I think physicians do a disservice when they don't tell the truth, right? When they don't tell people that you can tell somebody that for medical school was the worst time of your entire life and still say, I'm thankful I'm a doctor. I'm thankful for my degree. I'm thankful for what it has provided me in life and the access it has given me to things. But I think for me, I had a great support network. I think, and people will think it's crazy, but me having my son, my second year of medical school centered me. It was, I would get home, I would cook dinner. I would probably be up until 1 o'clock studying. But I never studied while I would study. While I was cooking dinner, I used to draw everything on the dry erase board and teach him my work. And then I would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and get to school and do it all over again. So I don't know how I did it, but that's what made it worth it for me, that he was looking at me. And so I consider myself a Panther mom. So I wanted to be that example for them. And we had the motto, assume success, and not by accident, but by design. But if I say not by accident, but by design, I have to be that scaffold to say, I can't say to you, my son's at Cornell, I can't say to you, boy, get through that school, make it happen, if I sat there and quit too. And so was it something, if I could do something different, I probably would have still went to medical school, but I really wanted to go to law school. I did, and I just didn't. But I don't think I was in that, that was not what my parents would have been okay with, which is fine. I tell my kids they can do what they want to do. I don't care. But that's because of what I went through. And so I want to make sure that they have a freedom to some extent, though, because they still got to make money. Don't sit in my house. So they still got to do their thing. But I want them to do what they want to do, but be successful at it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. There was one other person.
Oh, yeah, that was me again.
Okay. Oh, no problem.
But I guess this is more on building rapport and kind of building a name for yourself. So, like, for example, if I wanted to, let's say, come out of college and start my own strategy consultancy, something to do with healthcare, how would I even get someone to trust me if I'm, because I mean, for example, like you have the MD, you have a lot of that experience. So would you suggest that, you bounce around maybe like the big 3 consulting firms, get some of those names under your belt, and then say, okay, now it's time to take a leap. And, since I have these brands on my resume, then you can trust me because I've, been through the cycle multiple times.
I don't think that's a bad idea. I tell that to my niece right now. I think she's, is it Deloitte picked her up? I think it is really good. I think one of the benefits you'll get, and that's kind of what I was saying before, if you go with one of these larger firms, they might work you you're not going to get paid a huge amount of money. But getting that initial experience in those first couple of years is very crucial. It doesn't mean that you don't work on your business at the same time. And that's what I try to explain to everybody. You guys are young. I don't want to hear you're tired. There's no such thing as tired. Like, keep on grinding, because that's the only way you're going to get to that entrepreneur part. Because when you're an entrepreneur, there's some days that you're up, and I'm still doing it. If I have a huge legal case we're trying to get done, and we're right up against the hour, I'm up very late at night still. I'll be working on the weekend. So as an entrepreneur, you have to be able to put that time in. And so if you're going to do that, then it's a great way to start. Like, I even did that. You start at a company and then do your stuff on the side and then make that step. Also, what it allows you to do at that company is it allows you to stack paper. And so as you're stacking some of that money away, it gives you somewhat of a cushion as well. Because one of the realities about business is that I remember my dad telling me that. He said, your first 2 years, you will not be able to pay yourself. And I had an assistant that was doing a lot of stuff for me. I was able to pay her, but I couldn't pay me. And so when she would call out sick, I'd be mad because I didn't have the opportunity to call out sick, and she was still getting paid. And so it was one of those things that, by year 3, I was able to pay me. And then usually my dad used to tell me by year 5, if you're still around, you're going to keep on trucking. So, having some of that there to support you is also a great thing. If you're in a relationship, it's also helpful because you're not on one income, and I was very fortunate to have that. When I started my business, I was married, and he was a biomedical software engineer, so he had the funds coming in that allowed me to somewhat pursue my dreams. But that was until I signed my kids up for a very expensive private school, quit my job. So I think that was the only time he actually had a heart attack.
Great, thanks.
Yep. Anybody else?
So Lori Bishop again. Do you think that you'll start another business, or is this going to be you're so good at what you do? Do you have anything else on the horizon you think you might want to look at as a possibility?
Once you're an entrepreneur, you always have a bug for something else. And I have one kid left here. He's 10. And so that means as he grows, I get more time. And I have a coaching business that's sitting here in my back of my mind. My children have done very well. And I'm often asked by a lot of people, how did you do it? And that's where I branded Panther Mom from. And my daughter started the little t-shirts and stuff. And so we have a panthermom.com website and all of that set up. And it's surrounded around assumed success, and not by accident, but by design. And so I would love to put myself in a position to coach moms that are trying to balance career and being a mom, and understand that, you're doing fine and you can make this happen. And these are some choices that you can make and not make, and about empowering ourselves as women. And so I just need a little bit more time to get to it. This homeschool pandemic thing is not helping me out at all. But that is my other little thing that's still sitting there, and I still have my little site going, and eventually I'm going to make it happen.
Awesome. And we know you will.
Yes. Absolutely.
I guess my last question to kind of end us on a good note is, as a woman of color, as a woman in general, just going through the healthcare process, you kind of touched on like the few of the difficulties that you've had in your journey, and just like in general, like the health disparities that are present and the ones that you've been facing. What advice would you give to like women like myself who are trying to be medical professionals and might not want to kind of stick with the most traditional path afterwards?
Don't take no for an answer. Continue to forge forward. People are going to question you. Like I had somebody question me yesterday about a call that they wanted me on, and the coder, like, you know, the coder did a great job. I mean, it was this whole, I couldn't answer the question to the extent that he did. And they're like, well, no, we want you to speak for him. I don't speak for anybody. And this woman was like, so like pointed. And I know she has an issue with me because I'm Black, and I knew it. And I don't care. You know, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. And if you're not going to do it, that's fine. So I tell people, I tell women especially, don't be afraid to make the ask. Don't be afraid to say no. I learned how to say no when I was 18, and I have not turned back away from that. And don't allow somebody to tell you no, though. So don't sit there and go, oh, okay. And probably stop saying, I'm sorry. I wish somebody would hear me say, I'm sorry. You know, if I screwed up, I screwed it up. Then I will take that. But a lot of times as women, we start with, well, I'm sorry, but, and it's like, no, just own it. And people will learn to respect you. You can force people into respecting you. I don't care if you like me. I just need you to respect me and respect my mind.
Thank you. That's definitely something I needed to hear as someone who says I'm sorry a lot. So
yeah, I know. All of us do. All women do. I don't know where they came from.
Well said. Thank you for saying this to everybody.
I appreciate it. Thank you. So really quickly, I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen again just to kind of give a few little announcements. Before I get back into it though, thank you so much again, Dr. Sloan-Kelly, for coming.
You're welcome.
Sharing all of your insights, your stories, and I'm sure a bunch of us will be reaching out to you afterwards to kind of get more knowledge and information from you as we kind of continue down our healthcare journeys. In next events that we're having, like I mentioned at the beginning of the event, we're having an event next Thursday. We know that it kind of overlaps a little bit with Nexpo from IDEA, but we're hoping that you're able to attend kind of half and half. But we're going to have our Ventures Consulting team and come in and talk with us a little bit more about their summer project. It was the first one that they've done, and so Nirvana and Lynn will be kind of leading that and bringing in speakers from the company they worked with, Fimentum. So you'll get to hear kind of firsthand what they did and how they went about doing it, especially because it was their first time attempting something like this, especially like within ViTAL itself. And if you're interested at all in joining, I would recommend strongly to come to kind of see like what they went through and what you could potentially get to do.
I think oh, there it is.
We're going to be recapping the semester and giving our peers and eBoard members kind of a chance to network and talk with each other a little bit more about what we did and kind of get any insights that you might have on what you want to see moving forward. We definitely love to kind of collaborate with everyone and put on events that you guys want to attend. So we definitely are very open to anything that you might have. And this is not on the slide, but we do have an open eBoard position. We just filled one. We have a new finance lead. His name is Aaron. I believe he's on the call today. So we're really excited for him to join our eBoard and join us in kind of the more financial end of things, but we are still looking for a designer for our website to kind of transfer and add their own personal touches to, which is a great portfolio piece if that's something you're looking for if you're younger. But if you know of anyone that's interested in doing more website design, please reach out to us. We'd love to have another person join our eBoard. And of course, like if you are interested in any other positions, we will open up for general elections in the spring, which if you attend kind of in the spring semester, you'll learn more about. But other than that, I want to thank Dr. Sloan-Kelly again so much for coming. And with that, it's the end of our event and our Leaders in Healthcare series for this semester, but join us next week as well as 2 weeks after that for our last 2 events.